This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and today it is Tuesday. It's October 31st, 2023. Happy Halloween. First story involves the amount of debt that we're accumulating. It was alarming today when I saw this report. The U.S. is going to borrow $1.5 trillion in debt in this quarter, the fourth quarter of 2023, and next quarter, the first quarter of 2024. After borrowing a massive $1 trillion last quarter. This is unprecedented. This is the amount of debt that we've never accumulated at this fast a rate. And what it's looking like is that we will be adding, with $1.5 trillion in new debt for the next quarter, this current quarter to the next quarter, we will be at this rate, we're going to be at $41 trillion in debt by the end of 2024, because the rate is accelerating. I mean, we're right now about $33.6 trillion in debt. We just hit 33 trillion. We hit 34 trillion this fast, and then we continue at this borrowing rate. We're going to quickly have just an unmeasurably huge amount of debt in relationship to our GDP. The U.S. debt is set to expand by $3 trillion in the next 12-month period. This is more than 50%. The latest deficit of $2 trillion, annual budget deficit of $2 trillion. The budget deficit's different than the national debt. National debt budget deficit is a shortfall in the deficit, the amount is coming in taxes and the amount that's being spent by the government, and that's the deficit. But the debt is the accumulated deficits over any number from the beginning of the republic, and that's accelerated dramatically at a very, very rapid rate. This is the highest duration of debt. This 2024 looks like it's going to be the highest duration supply of debt that the market has seen absorbed since maybe 2010, when we were also borrowing very heavily. But with these amounts of accumulated national debt, it's going to push the amount of interest payments well over $1 trillion a year. Now, the problem is when these numbers get to be so huge, they're unmanageable. And we're just debasing the currency by having constant increases in the deficit with spending. The modern monetary theory, which is what the Democrats are operating under, essentially says that since we've got fiat currency, we pay off the debt with our own currency. As long as we can issue currency, national currency, we can pay off the debt no matter how large it gets to be. In other words, you could print $1 bill that says it's worth 35 or 34 trillion dollars, and the debt's now paid. The problem is that's not meaningful to anyone because it's completely hypothecated. It's made out of thin air. And when you do that, you're heading into hyperinflation. You're heading into printing so much money that the purchasing power of the dollar is diminishing to about zero. And just take a look at what $100 buys at the grocery store today compared to what it did before the pandemic. Now, there's two consequences of this. Number one is that the bond market is now hovering at around 5% interest, when before the new normal, that 5% interest is dramatically different than when bonds were at 1%. In other words, well, interest rates were being held at zero by the Federal Reserve during the Obama years, especially to boost sagging growth. The bond market was at about 1%. So you were getting your debt by paying very little interest. When bonds cost 5% and you want to raise money, either as a municipality or as a corporation or any other entity, bonds are going to be more expensive. Now, this has an effect of basically causing a recession eventually, which is in the works of happening right now. The massive accumulation of debt by nations is what ruins countries. And the Biden administration seems to be thinking, well, $1 billion here, $1 billion there, and we do not have a budget. We haven't been able to have a federal budget for years. This is what caused Kevin McCarthy to lose his job. Deals that he made and the continuing resolutions that he's passed over the years, just to keep the government going. Now, maybe this new Speaker of the House, Johnson, will do something tougher. But again, the Democrats have no interest in setting national a budget that they live by, because they constantly want to spend more money. What's happening in Washington is that the entire corruption is just apparent. The number of people who go to Washington and become wealthy in Congress and the Senate is astounding. I guess, the Babylon Bee today is saying the best way to become rich under the Biden administration is to be Hunter Biden. The second best way may be to go get elected to Congress, because they come away wealthy. The Biden administration has found a way. I wrote a book in 2011 called America for Sale. Maybe it was 2009 I wrote that book, called America for Sale. And I was predicting then that what would happen is that families like the Bidens would realize that you could get enormous amounts of cash from oligarchs around the world who had the cash for buying political favor. And the Clintons figured this out with the Clinton Foundation. I wrote another book called Partners in Crime, about Bill and Hillary Clinton, and how Hillary, as Secretary of State, had her own private email system that she put in her home, and that allowed her, while Secretary of State, not to use the official State Department email system to conduct Clinton administration business on a private email server in conjunction with what she was doing, setting government policy as Secretary of State. And Biden, under Obama, got equal benefits when he was given carte blanche to go ahead and go to Ukraine and go to China with his son and to cut for things they wanted to accomplish through laws or other changes in the government in the United States, just paying for it. And paying the Bidens a few $1 billion, would be cheap compared to going to war or to having a, concession made that would affect a major economic swing or deal. So this corruption is rampant, and the justice system is completely broken because it's politicized, and they will not prosecute Biden. So when you see this kind of corruption, this kind of spending, the new normal, which the stock market is now, considering, is that we are going to find a neutral range for interest rates set by the Federal Reserve. In other words, interest rates now at 8% on a 30-year fixed mortgage, interest rates around 5% for the Federal Reserve System. They think inflation won't get out of control and unemployment won't get too much to be intolerable politically. So it's really not going back to a zero inflation or 2% inflation. It's just, let's keep it so it's increasing, but slow enough so that no one cares. This is a formula for disaster. And it's why I'm saying to everyone that gold is going to now quickly become an important refuge, because your purchasing power is deteriorating fast. And gold is today it's trading again, still over $2,000 an ounce, $2,009 an ounce. And I think it's going to continue to increase. Let's see what silver is at. Silver is also increasing, perhaps a little bit more, $23.35 an ounce. It's a little bit down from yesterday, but again, the gold is up over 2,000. If it stays there and sets a new trading range above $2,000 an ounce, it's going to mean that those who suppress the price of gold by controlling the gold exchanges, and the big banks manipulate gold, and some have been prosecuted recently for doing so, they're going to lose control. Gold is just going to start accelerating. Now, if Chris will show, I want people to get this new book. It's free, and it's How a Coming Global Crash is going to cause an historic gold rush. We're going to be talking about all the economics today. You can get this book free. Call Swiss America and get your IRAs and your 401ks out of the stock market, out of mutual funds that are in the stock market. So the toll-free number is 1-800-519-6268. Get a free copy of How the Coming Global Crash will create an historic gold rush. 1-800-519-6268. Do it today and understand the dynamics that are going on internationally. What can you do about it? You can get out of debt if you can. Stop using credit cards, which are now over $1 trillion, and we're having delinquencies on car payments increase, delinquencies on credit cards increase. We are building towards a massive crash. And when that happens, if you don't get out first, when stock markets really start declining rapidly, then you're stuck with losses. And it may take quite a while for those losses to recover. This is to me, the debt accumulation at this rate should for everyone be an alarm. This is not business as usual. Okay, now secondly, the Israeli forces are doing a major advance now towards Gaza. And the story being reported, the Wall Street Journal is doing some pretty good reporting on this. And international sources are as well. There's Israel's moved the tanks, military, infantry, and also artillery into Gaza. So they began a major incursion in Gaza. And they're encircling the Gaza's largest population center, which is Gaza City. Now, the Gaza is a small strip of land along the Mediterranean by Egypt, the southern part of Israel, and it has been controlled by Hamas. When Hamas did the surprise attack, killing 1,400 Jews on October 7th, it was a horrifying attack because, again, the leftist governments in Israel, which have dominated over the last 20 years, have largely disarmed the Israeli population. I believe Canada is also being disarmed right now. And Jews in the United States, by the way, are beginning to buy weapons. There's an historic shift going on, I think, with the Jewish population realizing that the Democratic Party is no longer a safe refuge for them. The Democratic Party, which has gone Marxist, neo-Marxist, is out marching and supporting Hamas. Hamas has resolved since its inception to kill Jews and to destroy the state of Israel. Hamas is being funded by Iran. Hezbollah is also being funded by Iran, and Hezbollah is in Lebanon. So in this expanding war, Israel is also having strikes in Syria and in Lebanon to take out various remnants of ISIS, various Hezbollah forces which have been sending rockets into Israel. And this war could easily expand beyond Israel, into Syria and into Lebanon. Now that would strain the Israeli forces. As if Israel gets strained, Israel's not going to lose. I'm going to start selling some of my books and my own stock of books. I want to. I've got authors' copies I'm going to assign and begin to sell. One of them is Why Israel Can't Wait, which I wrote in 2009. I was in Israel and had a discussion with Yalon, who was the vice chairman, number 2 in the government under Netanyahu at that time. I didn't know whether the meeting was going to happen until I was actually sitting with him. It could have easily gotten canceled any time along the way. And Yalon and I talked about Ezekiel 37:38, which certainly sounds like a nuclear war between Iran, Gog and Magog, between Iran and Israel, and God intervenes and Israel is saved. And I asked Elon what he was going to do. Elon said, how difficult do you think it would be for us to put out all the lights in the Middle East except our own? Well, they did that to Gaza. They turned off the water, they turned off the electricity, they turned off the internet. Israel did. And then immediately, of course, the international community started complaining because there's a massive sympathy now for Hamas around the world, which 20 or 30 years did not exist. The amount of funding, the amount of United Nations support for the Palestinian cause, and the increasing distance from the Holocaust causes people not to realize that the Jewish state was created after the Holocaust as a safe haven for Jews and was largely motivated. The creation of Israel in 1948, Harry Truman agreed to the partition of Palestine because of the Holocaust, because of the horrors that people realizing that Hitler had tried to exterminate the Jews in Europe in a barbaric way, rounding them up, destroying families, put gas chambers, incinerating the bodies. It was a horror show, a nightmare. And it deeply scarred the psyche of the Jewish people, realizing that they've said never again is that going to happen. So when I had the discussion with Yalon, it came down to, said, well, if Israel faces a nuclear Iran, what are you going to do? And I wrote a book in 2005 called Atomic Iran. Been on this case for a long time, almost 20 years. And Yalon said, we will defend Israel regardless of the consequences. So if it came to using nuclear weapons, if it was an existential moment, I really have no doubt that Israel would use any measure possible to defend Israel, regardless of the consequences to the world. And that's why I think there's so much concern that this could be on the brink of World War III. Now, to put this in the economic context, the World Bank is today warning that we could see the price of oil go to, I think they're saying about $157 a barrel. Now, I actually think oil could go as high as $200 a barrel. Why? Again, there's a combination of forces here. Number one, the Middle East conflict, which will impact production. And so we've seen slumping oil prices through the summer, but oil is already now up to $83 an ounce. Okay, so oil to get to $100 an ounce would not be a far stretch. And if OPEC and the other countries decide to reduce production, we have a repeat of what happened in 1973 with the Yom Kippur War. And the OPEC nations then imposed an oil embargo on the United States. We had gas lines going around the block to get cars refilled. Now, already we see the BRIC nations, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and one of the other countries in the oil-producing nations have joined the BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And this is forming a yet emerging but anti-American, anti-dollar bloc of countries that want to see their advance, and China and Russia and India are at the heart of it. Now, there's conflicts within the BRIC nations. China and India have been at each other's throats for a long time. But the overall goal is to diminish the power of the United States. Now, if we see oil prices get as high as the World Bank is saying, and the other factor here is $157 an ounce, it's going to cause another negative economic impact, because with energy prices increasing, the cost of everything increases. The cost of transportation increases. The cost of production increases. And that will again cause another recessionary force, because when costs increase, the economy slows down and credit becomes more difficult to obtain. When interest rates are this high, banks pull back on lending. So we've got the exact configuration of forces here. And then you add one additional factor, and that is the climate hysteria, which has caused people to say hydrocarbon fuels cause global warming, which is not the case. It's basically a lie, because hydrocarbon fuels emit carbon dioxide, but carbon dioxide is only 0.04%, 0.035%, in that range of the atmosphere. The largest greenhouse gas is water vapor, but the left doesn't demonize water vapor because hydrocarbon fuels don't emit water vapor when they're burned. So the point is, this whole exercise is that the Earth had far more carbon dioxide 600 million years ago, and we've had ice ages in that period of time. So carbon dioxide is not the turning knob of the Earth's temperature, even though that's what the left would have you believe. But because of all the switching and the Carter policies, Carter, nixed pipelines, he's held back drilling rights, and the oil reserves of the oil industry have drawn down. So we are not producing oil in the volume which we could need it in coming winter. And that, again, will be an escalation of the price impact. All these forces together, to me, are spelling a global crash that's going to occur, because, right, it's in the works, because the world is existing on credit that is overextended, and the forces that are at play are going to depress economic activity. The war in Ukraine, the war in Israel now, potential war in Taiwan, with China decides it's time to get an attack on Taiwan. The world did nothing when China took over Hong Kong, and China will calculate the time when the world will do nothing when we take over Taiwan. We've got our military now concentrated in the Mediterranean, and we've not in the South China Sea. And we're diverted to watch over Israel with some 20,000 troops ready to be deployed in the Middle East. If we deploy troops in the Middle East, even to protect our bases around in various countries like Syria, we're going to find this becomes very quickly an international conflict of some dimension, involving the United States as a major power, with Russia and China both supporting Iran. Chris, do you want to comment on this? I mean, this is a scenario that I'm finding today to be very concerning.
It's heating up over there. This is something that's probably been heating up for a long time. We've been talking about the potential of World War III, and I mean by we as in the talking heads around the country and perhaps the world. People think that, again, we've been on the brink of this for a while anyway. We can talk about the Cold War, but right now we have these tensions in the Middle East that are finally coming to a head. The problem is, again, some of the surrounding nations, factions in these surrounding nations around Israel, and the terrorist organizations have been sharpening their spears and swords for a long time, waiting for something like this to happen, hoping that the world political climate would at least partially stand against Israel. This is their opportunity, at least I believe they see that way, to start something or to escalate an issue, and then, yes, to cripple the rest of the world financially.
Well, there's a lot of forces right now that want to destroy, including the neo-Marxist movement we have in the United States. And that's the point of this new book that is just now out. I think this is the first week. And I have to start getting some interviews to publicize this, but it is the truth about neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy. And that's what we have on the American left. They have become neo-Marxist. The whole woke has evolved out of Gramsci, an Italian Marxist, who had said, let's attack the culture of capitalism to destroy capitalism. The whole Marxist movement from its beginning has been negative and destructive, can only destroy. When Marxism takes over, it kills millions of people. Famines, not producing food. It's a dictatorial movement where an oligarchy, a small group of people, hold all the money, and everybody else middle class evaporates. Everybody else lives in a state of survival. That's been one of the oldest of human fallacies, the king and the serfs. The power concentrated in the hands of a few, and it is fundamentally destructive. Now, the left has also then embraced Palestine, has embraced Iran. John Kerry has been accused of giving intelligence secrets from Israel to Iran. John Kerry, I wrote in 2005, Atomic Iran, at that time wanted to give Iran nuclear energy to see what it would do with it. That's the book. And what we see is that the terrorist, you can see in the eyes of that drawing, which I thought was brilliant at the time it was done, nuclear explosions. The Iranians have said for decades, death to Israel, death to America. And they have resolved to destroy Israel. The Iranians are Shiites. Shiites have a very bizarre take on Islam, which is that the family of prophets should be the only rulers, not the caliphate or the secular rule, which the Sunnis believe in. Saudi Arabians and most Muslims are Sunnis. Shiites happen to be a majority in Iran. It's, I think, one of the few countries where that's the case. Now, the idea is that this little well, they call him the Mahdi, Mahdi, centuries ago, and when he comes out of the well, he's in hiding. There will be a worldwide apocalypse, and Israel will be destroyed. And the belief is that then Shiite Islam will triumph worldwide. You get a religion with that kind of a belief, you got a very dangerous force. And Iran is behind what's going on right now. But the American left has abandoned Israel. Jews in the United States are weaponizing, getting protection, and they don't feel safe, given that the universities and the Democrats, which they've traditionally walked with, are now walking. The Democrats are walking with Hamas. The universities are with Hamas. Now, if you're Jewish, that's very frightening because you've always had refuge in the United States, in the universities and the leftist intellectuals. And the Jews tend to have been Democrats over the past few decades. And again, this is a political shift that's going on, but it's not favorable. It's destabilizing because the forces that are opposing Israel today have never been stronger or more unison together. And I think this could be, depending upon how, and Israel's, by the way, saying that this war is going to take months. It's not going to be over quick. It's going to take time. They're probably going to destroy Gaza, level it, make it all rubble, unlivable, and will not let Hamas back in. I would not be surprised to see Israel take over the Gaza Strip and make it again part of Israel. So we're into some major issues, and I want to cover one more story before we wrap up today, because this also, I think, again, alarmed me to see this happen. But we're seeing The Guardian in London, which is a leftist publication, and The Guardian is reporting today a new, and Mark Morano is also on this, by the way, in the Climate Depot. He's covering it extensively. Pascal Soriot, and that's Soriot, wrote an editorial in The Guardian today, and he is very prominent in the pharmaceutical industry. He is the chief executive of the Anglo-Swedish pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca, which was involved, of course, in COVID. Now, what he is saying is that he's saying we've got to go with the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the UN's climate group, which says we have to decarbonize because we cannot have temperature increases above 1.5% degrees Celsius, which essentially wants us to return to pre-industrial levels of decarbonization. Because the whole theory of the left is that It was only with industrialization, we started burning hydrocarbon fuels, that the Earth started heating up. And again, the data was altered to come to that conclusion in the hockey stick graph, which was done by Michael Mann. And my book on energy goes at great lengths to show how that fraudulent that is. We even have the ClimateGate emails, which was a computer where these climate scientists, including Michael Mann, were talking about the hockey stick graph, and they admitted in the emails that they were falsifying the data. Now, this AstraZeneca article in The Guardian is linking now health to climate change. So they're saying there's been a chronic rise, the rise in chronic diseases linked to air pollution, which they then link to global warming. So I'm going to read a paragraph or two. Heat-related deaths are expected to triple by 2050. Currently, 7 million people die prematurely each year from air pollution, more than the death toll during the entire pandemic. There's been a rise in chronic diseases linked to air pollution, and evidence suggests it's driving up cancer rates too. Lung cancer and respiratory-related deaths linked to air pollution are up 160% over the past 30 years, and it causes genetic mutations in some lung cancer-related genes. And then they go on to say, the toll on loved ones, public health, and the economy is large and rising. It's been estimated that poor health costs the economy, the global economy, 15% of global GDP. It's not only the oil companies, car makers, and airlines at fault. Healthcare alone contributes 5% of global greenhouse gas emissions, up to 8% in the advanced countries. So they're linking now health. They haven't got enough enthusiasm with climate hysterics saying that global warming is going to kill us all. Now they're going to say it's going to kill us all because it's going to cause increased sickness, including lung cancer and heart problems and all kinds of, and global warming. Well, cooling kills many more people than warming does. Warming is not going to kill nearly the group of people that global cooling would cause, or winter. But if they link these two together, they've upped the existential threat of this global warming hoax, because now people can be afraid that they're going to die. Now, this is the same company that produced vaccines, which were experimental, and for whom the after effects are appearing to be fairly startling, with heart problems, instant deaths, a lot of different issues related to these vaccines. That's not talked about. What's talked about is shifting the blame over to global warming. So I guess it's time now. We're going to see, with all of this coming out, we're going to see another call for the UN to declare a global health emergency, a global warming emergency, a climate emergency, so to give the governments extraordinary powers of control. Where both COVID and now the climate change movement are being used to engineer more power in the hands of government and more suppression of the freedoms which our Constitution and Bill of Rights grant to us. Actually, God grants the rights. The point is that governments are now not respecting the rights that our Constitution attempted to preserve. The last point I want to cover today is on this release by the archives, very quietly. I don't think it was covered very extensively, but they're in response to a Freedom of Information Act request. They found 82,000 pages of Joe Biden emails when he was vice president using a pseudonym. In other words, he was not emailing Joe Biden. He was emailing under a name he made up. Now, again, that's an indication of corruption. It's an indication he was hiding his identity from being seen in order that he could secretly sell off influence, bribery schemes. They didn't think it was to be caught. 82,000 pages worth of emails, according to the National Archives. More than 33,000 emails of former Secretary Hillary Clinton were illegally deleted from her private server. That's far more than that. So both Biden and Hillary were manipulating emails in order to do personal private deals selling influence of their government offices under the Obama administration. And you wonder why we have an increasing national debt accelerating, because again, the government has learned how to spend the people's money to enrich themselves. And that means the highest offices in the land. Biden's president. And he has this history of bribery, and the Justice Department does nothing about it. Okay, now, when this type of corruption is obvious and not attended to, people lose trust in government entirely. And the insecurity right now, the distrust of government, is being reflected in the economic pain people are increasingly bearing. People are beginning to see the link that the government is not being managed for the betterment of the people. We, the people, are not in charge any longer. A group of oligarchs getting richer in charge of the government. And that includes both sides. Mitch McConnell with his wife, Elaine Chao, she is worth millions in China. And her family in China wouldn't be alive if Mitch McConnell wasn't willing to do China's bidding in the U.S. Senate. This is a dire time in the world. I don't think I've seen this much corruption, this much loss of authority within the United States government, this loss of responsibility, this corruption. It's a very frightening time. Chris, any final points before we wrap up?
We joke about the two-tier justice system. We're watching it play out right now. In Colorado, the idea is to try to take Donald Trump off the ballot now to run in keep him from running in 2024 there. That's going to be an interesting bird, because you can see a judge giving an order to say Trump's off the ballot, knowing, and again, look, we're seeing corruption in the government. So people who are watching or listening to this might be thinking, hey, no judge is going to not follow the letter of the law. I don't think you've been paying attention the last maybe 10 to 35 years. However, a judge might say, hey, nope, can't put Trump on the ballot. He's going to go. They print the ballots. A higher court says, that's wrong. Trump has to be on the ballot. It's too little, too late. The ballots are already printed, and he's not there. This could happen in Colorado. Again, this is a sort of a critical, or let's put it this way, it's a scorched earth scenario where Colorado and maybe at least 5 to 10 other states could do the same thing, and their hands are, let's just say, tied when it comes to reprinting the ballots later on. Again, they have to cheat to win in 2024.
Well, that's going to be another problem. And what I'm sensing, the kind of sick joke that's passing around Washington with these 82,000 pages of Biden using us, they're saying, well, I guess it's time to have another arrest of Donald Trump. Right. In other words, let's wag the dog. Let's change the news cycle to get attention off of Biden and make it Trump. And we're in the process of politicizing, where Trump is being indicted. If our political system takes former presidents and wants to imprison them because they don't like their policies, if the justice system and the Supreme Court stands by and lets this happen under the idea that nobody's above the law, well, does that include Biden or doesn't it? Because he certainly appears above the law.
What really gets me is they're actually prosecuting people for representing Trump. You could do the same thing against mass murderers who are knowingly guilty. The fact is, every defense lawyer will tell you that everybody deserves justice. Everybody deserves their day in court, and everybody deserves a proper legal defense. Well, apparently Donald Trump doesn't, because the jackboot's coming on legal advisors and representatives like Powell and, of course, the crying Jenna Ellis. They find weak people. Again, Trump surrounded himself with these people, but they find weak people, and they're just put screws to them.
Well, the pressure is enormous. I mean, I've faced it. I was under the Russian collusion. They wanted me to plead that I had lied about Julian Assange, that I had. Well, I didn't lie, and I told them I would not plead guilty. They could put me in prison the rest of my life. I refused their plea deal. They did not indict me. They knew they were lying. This is the problem with it. The Justice Department today will lie, will pressure, will do everything it can to get an indictment on a narrative it knows wasn't true. Russian collusion we spent the entire Trump administration talking about Russian collusion, with CNN going apoplectic every day about Russian collusion, and it was all nonsense. It was all completely a lie manufactured by Hillary Clinton to take the pressure off the emails that were being disclosed by Julian Assange, which had revealed Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Hillary had colluded to deny Bernie Sanders the opportunity to do well in the primaries in 2016. Debbie Wasserman Schultz resigned. Then the emails with Podesta that showed all the corruption of Hillary, all the health problems of Hillary.
Yep.
So the point is, Jenna Ellis and Sidney Powell, who were representing Trump, had a right to ask questions about the 2020 election. But no, I mean, you mean all the activity we saw with, ballots being run through machines in the middle of the night, trucks delivering to polling places,
Filled with
huge numbers.
ballots. Yes.
That didn't happen. I mean, can't that be questioned? No.
That's the thing. The idea is not just to say, hey, you can't talk about the Biden election. The questions about the 2016 election were mainstreamed. The questions about the 2020 election were not. The fact is, if you're trying to hide something, one's going to use all resources to do so. Well, that's what's happening. 2016 was like, hey, all right, fine, you can say whatever you want. Nothing happened. 2020, shut up about it.
It's at the core of what I'm talking about in this book. That the Marxists say that they can make things up, they can lie, but they're truth. So therefore, even if the election 2020 was stolen, they say, well, it was legitimate, and therefore, if you question it, you're an insurrectionist. Okay, but in 2016, they could publish in the front page of the New York Times that Donald Trump had Russian influence, which caused him to win the election. We had a Justice Department investigation on that went on virtually for the entire Trump presidency. So the two-sidedness here, or the intolerance of the left, the conviction that they are right, that their made-up values, this woke nonsense, is the correct way of viewing values. And if you disagree with it, you're a criminal, or you're not fighting for the cause. You need to be censored. You need possibly to be put in the thought reform camp. This is Communism 101. It's what the Cultural Revolution was all about in China. It's about a small group maintaining power with the jackboot of the law enforcement agencies operating politically. The Bible gives us a solution to these kinds of days, and that is, which are increasingly appearing to be end-day events, which is 2 Chronicles 7:14, where God instructs us to get on our knees and ask for forgiveness for letting it get to this point. In the 1940s, we should have been up and resisting that God was taken out of the schools. You can't have moral education if God's out of the schools. If you don't have moral education, you're going to go down this path of destroying the family. Destroy the family, you undercut the social character, the moral character of a society, and our Constitution means nothing once God is out of the equation, once families are destroyed, and once you can have any gender you want to choose. So, and babies being killed in the womb, cut apart by brutal abortionists. These are offenses against God's law, and we will have a judgment of God. Increasingly, I think that the judgment of God will be severe, but that we will get past it to another era, because this evil has got to be opposed. And if we do oppose it, God will, as said in 2 Chronicles 7:14, hear our prayer and heal our land. We're at that point. So join me in asking God to forgive us. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today is Tuesday, October 31st, 2023. TheTruthCentral.com. We're on a lot of different websites. Check out TheTruthCentral.com. You can see we're on BitChute. We're on Rumble. We have audio broadcasts only. Take a look at the website. There's a lot of information on it. We'll be adding information on it over the next few days and weeks. Do get the copy of your free book calling Swiss America. And I think it's something that I'll give you the number here one more time before we sign off. The number is 1-800-519-6268 to get a free copy of How the Coming Global Crash Will Create an Historic Gold Rush. Please talk to Swiss America. That's Swiss America's number. Dean Heskin co-authored this book with me. They will give you the economic prognostication and explain to you the value of owning some gold when the currency is debasing as fast as it is. 1-800-519-6268. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow. God bless.